The second round is underway at Roland Garros, and the two matches that stood out for me were both upsets. It was Borges taking out Casper Ruud and Mateo Gigante taking out Tsitsipas. I'm going to dedicate this video to Tsitsipas because I do think it's quite interesting what's happening to him. But let me quickly talk about Casper Ruud. He was injured in this match. Of course, Nuno Borges is a phenomenal player. I was very impressed with him last year when he beat Nadal in the final of Bastad. And I also remember watching Borges play in the NCAA singles final when he played for Mississippi State. So I'm not taking any credit away from Nuno, but it was clear that Casper Ruud couldn't really move in the third and fourth set, in which he only got one game. But Casper is one of the nicest guys on tour. And I listened to his post-match press conference, and Casper hurt his knee at the tournament in Monte Carlo. Now, you wouldn't have thought that Casper played injured in this clay court season because he accomplished something that a lot of his fans were waiting for, and it was a huge title. He finally got his first Masters 1000 title in Madrid. But a lot of people, including myself, weren't aware that Casper did it while being injured. Now, he doesn't have any torn ligaments in his left knee, but there's fluid in there and it swells up and it is quite painful, and it's affecting him in a very specific way on the court. And the problem with the knee, and I have a lot of experience with this, is that you can play with certain knee problems, but there are going to be certain shots where you're going to be very careful. So what Casper said in the interview was that the open stance backhand, where he had to slide out with his left foot, it was a shot that was very painful, and he was avoiding that shot. And I think this is so interesting because in today's game, you cannot survive on tour, especially on the ATP tour, without possessing an open stance two-handed backhand. Why? Because guys are going to attack that side. They're going to put a lot of pressure and possibly spin to that side, and this is a shot that you absolutely must possess. So by avoiding this shot, you have absolutely no chance to compete at this level. And it was quite obvious because Casper only got one game in those last two sets. Some people will say, why didn't Casper pull out and save his knee? Why did he play on an injured knee? He said that the knee was painful right from the get-go, but it progressively got worse. So maybe he wanted to give it a shot, but then you could make the argument, why didn't he just retire when it started hurting really bad? But I think Casper is such a great sportsman. He wanted to finish the match, and Nadal throughout his career was very similar in that regard. He didn't like to withdraw from a lot of matches where he was indeed injured. He always tried to finish the match, give the opponent a proper win, give the crowd a proper match. That's what a great sportsman does. Is it the smartest thing to do? Probably not. And now let's talk about Tsitsipas. People are absolutely bashing him because he lost in the second round of Roland Garros. They're telling him it's time to retire and so on. Now, before I talk about Tsitsipas, I want to give Mateo Gigante credit because he played an exceptional match. First of all, he plays with a head prestige racket, which is so cool, and it's something that we don't see too often. I feel that the old classic rackets are kind of dying out, where the vast majority of players are using power rackets. Now, Mateo has a very interesting game. Very heavy forehand with a lot of spin, but a rather flat backhand. He has great volleys. He's incredibly quick, can run down a lot of balls. And when he runs balls down, he displays exceptional touch. On top of all that, he's got a very interesting service motion. And he happens to be a lefty, which makes that serve even more dangerous. And Tsitsipas gave a lot of credit to Mateo after the match, but he was also very disappointed. And before I talk about the Tsitsipas game, we need to discuss his racket situation because it's connected to his struggles. So I've made a video after the Dubai tournament, and I talked about Tsitsipas switching to the Babolat Pure Aero 98 racket. And I thought that this was a fantastic move from Stefanos. Why? Because Stefanos during this tournament said that in recent times the conditions have slowed down a lot. It's the surfaces, and more importantly, it's the balls that are getting slower and slower. Now, I listen to a lot of players, And it appears that these slow conditions do not bother players the same way, because there are some players who can hit through slow conditions. For example, Sinner and Alcaraz, they're hitting very aggressive and hard, and it doesn't matter that the balls are dead. But I do think there are some players that are struggling with the change of conditions in recent times. And by recent times, I'm talking about months, especially the 2025 season. And there are 3 players that struggle with the conditions more than others: Tsitsipas, Medvedev, and Zverev. Now, the results of these 3 guys have been way worse than the results they normally produce on the tour. And it's so obvious that Medvedev and Tsitsipas are looking for answers. I always listen to Medvedev interviews because they're the best, quite frankly. And Daniil is testing so many strings. He is switching rackets. Sometimes he'll switch a different Technifiber racket inside of a match. And he said that he's currently testing so many different strings and he just can't find one that he likes. In the case of Daniil, he will use the opponent's power to make power. He also has large swings, especially on his forehand. And the power doesn't appear to come easy to him when he has to make it himself. And therefore, he's looking for some help from his equipment. I think Tsitsipas is similar to some extent. Of course, like I said, these guys are completely different type of players. But it appears to me that as I'm watching Tsitsipas throughout this clay court season, his balls don't look nearly as aggressive as they used to look, even in the 2024 clay court season, in which he did quite well. He won Monte Carlo, final of Barcelona, and made the quarters of Roland Garros. And this year's clay court results have been a lot worse. Now, the confusing thing for me is that Tsitsipas did so well in Dubai, a tournament that he won playing with the Aero 98. In the semifinal, his shot quality was through the roof on the one-handed backhand, which is his big weakness. Now, he continued to play with the Aero in Monte Carlo, Barcelona, and Madrid. But according to Jonas from Tennis Nerd, who has a connection with Tsitsipas, he felt that he couldn't trust this racket. So in Rome, he went back to his Wilson blade. Now, the Tsitsipas 2025 clay court season is super interesting because he lost 4 matches to 2 players. Twice he lost to Arthur Fils and twice he lost to Musetti. Of course, in Barcelona against Fils, he didn't finish the match. And Tsitsipas didn't, of course, lose in the first round of those tournaments, so he did win some matches. So I was, number one, very surprised that he switched back to the blade in Rome. Didn't make a lot of sense to me. And I was very surprised that he lost in the second round of Roland Garros. So in my opinion, the big problem for Tsitsipas is the fact that he is not as aggressive of a player as he used to be. Now, looking ahead for Tsitsipas, he is in a very dangerous situation because for the first time in 7 years, he has dropped out of the top 20. His current live ranking is 25 in the world, and he could drop even lower. What this means is that in the most important tournaments, he might get horrible draws, and it's going to be more difficult to climb back into not only the top 20, but especially if he wants to get back into the top 10. It's going to be tough. And I do listen to the players, and it appears that conditions have changed, and players must adapt or they're going to be left behind. In the case of Zverev, Medvedev, and Tsitsipas, these guys need to get control of the situation, tinker with their equipment, improve their technique to get more out of their technique, because it is clear that the slowdown conditions, in my opinion, affect these 3 guys more than other players who possibly don't care that the balls are slower. They can hit through them anyway.
In the last couple of months, there have been some changes on the ATP Tour, and a lot of players were vocal about it. There were a few players inside the top 10 that spoke about it, how balls and courts have become slower and slower. And I'm just trying to adapt to that and use that more into my benefit, because I felt like one of the things that I wasn't having a great time with was these slow conditions that I was being faced with in the last couple of months. So I'm trying to perhaps change that feeling of discomfort that I've been feeling lately.